My daughter-in-law didn't invite me on the voyage, telling me plainly, "There's no funds, you remain put." I offered a smile and responded, "Very well." Yet, by the hour they had embarked, I was already sipping coffee on the vessel's deck. My son shouted, "Are you trailing us? Depart from here, you deranged woman." But then the captain approached and uttered something that caused them to turn ashen and fall to their knees. Friends, prior to commencing this account, I humbly request a small favour. Kindly subscribe to the channel, activate that like button, and inform us in the comments which city you are presently residing in. Your patronage assists narratives like this in resonating more powerfully. Please enjoy the listening experience. The kitchen exuded the aroma of simmered onions and bell peppers. It was a scent, familiar and comforting, one that invariably brought to mind periods when existence was more straightforward and the dining table was more laden. I turned the patties in the frying pan, endeavouring to steer clear of dwelling on the likelihood that I would again be consuming this meal solo. My universe had contracted to the confines of the carriage house, a modest guest dwelling separate from the substantial estate I had established many decades prior. A decade ago, following my husband's passing, I relinquished all assets to Tavorius. "You are a man," I told my son. "You are now the patriarch of the family." I desired for him to grasp the weight of responsibility, to stand taller. However, instead of ascending like an eagle, he merely developed a greater appetite for the caprices of his wife, Kenyatta. Now I resided back here, striving for anonymity, much like an antique piece of furniture that, while sentimental, no longer complemented the interior design. The door creaked open. A current of crisp autumn air surged into the kitchen's warmth, followed by Tavorius and Kenyatta. They appeared agitated. Tavorius avoided my gaze, idly toying with the button on his sport coat, while Kenyatta, conversely, carried herself with an air of exaggerated distress. She tossed her trench coat onto a chair without so much as a greeting, and exhaled deeply, as though bearing the burden of all her ancestors. "Mama, we must converse," Torius began, but his voice faltered. He glanced at his wife, seeking support. Kenyatta promptly assumed control. "Mother Oilia, we are facing a predicament." Her tone was cloying, laced with that disingenuous concern that invariably tightened my jaw. "Do you recall our discussion regarding the roof? That infiltration in the eastern wing?" I gave a nod. Of course I recalled. Just a week earlier, I had withdrawn $15,000 from my savings, nearly all that remained of my burial fund, and presented it to them. They insisted the repairs were urgent, otherwise my home would begin to deteriorate. "Well," Kenyatta paused with theatrical flair, placing a hand over her chest. "The estimate has increased. The contractors discovered black mold upon opening the ceiling. The structural beams are completely compromised. Essentially, all our contingency funds are depleted, and we even had to contribute from our own reserves." I remained silent, anticipating the inevitable declaration. I sensed it approaching, the way one feels an impending storm in their joints long before the first rumble of thunder. "And where is this leading?" I inquired softly, reducing the heat beneath the skillet. "We cannot accommodate you on the cruise," Kenyatta blurted out. For a fleeting instant, a spark of triumph flickered in her eyes before being masked by feigned regret. "The funds are simply unavailable, Oilia. Do you comprehend? The ticket prices escalated, and now, with these repairs, Devorius and I have barely managed to scrape together enough for ourselves to simply catch our breath. Our nerves are frayed." Torius finally met my gaze. Guilt swam in his eyes, mingled with apprehension regarding his wife. "I apologize, Mama," he mumbled. "It is preferable for you to remain here. You can oversee the labourers, tend to the garden, and we We will procure a memento for you. Indeed, oversee the estate, Kenyatta chimed in, her lips contorted into a petulant, aggrieved grimace. Someone must maintain order while we economize on this excursion. I observed her, experiencing a peculiar void. There was no bitterness, no ire, merely a stark clarity. My gaze drifted to her wrist. Kenyatta adjusted her hair and the cuff of her deep mahogany blouse slid upward. On her wrist a bracelet gleamed, a delicate chain of white gold adorned with diamonds. A tennis bracelet. I recognized that design. I knew the jeweler. I knew its price. That was not costume jewelry. It was a piece valued at a minimum of 3 times the cost of the repairs she had just lamented. She noticed my scrutiny and swiftly pulled her sleeve down, but it was too late. Very well, I stated. My voice was even. Even to myself, it sounded unexpectedly composed. If there are no funds, then there are no funds. You two go and rest. I will see to the estate. They exchanged glances. They anticipated tears, guilt trips, pleas. My composure disconcerted them, yet relief superseded their suspicion. That is settled then, Kenyatta declared, rising instantly, abandoning her dramatic charade. We must hurry and pack. We depart at first light tomorrow morning. Do not offer us any provisions. We are observing a fast prior to the journey. They departed, leaving me in the quietude of the cooling kitchen. I spent the evening attending to my customary duties. I washed the dishes, wiped down the table. The darkness outside deepened, transforming the garden into a monochromatic photograph. Approaching midnight, I gathered the refuse to dispose of it in the receptacles by the main entrance. The air was sharp outside. The wind sent dry foliage tumbling down the driveway. I approached the substantial refuse container used by the occupants of the principal residence. My son and his wife. The lid was propped open. Torius must have discarded something in haste before retiring for the night. The wind caught a crumpled ball of paper that had fallen from the bin and propelled it towards my feet. I stooped and retrieved it. It was weighty paper, crushed into an unceremonious sphere. I intended to simply toss it back, but something, perhaps the quality of the paper, too substantial for a mere supermarket receipt, caused me to hesitate. I smoothed out the sheet. The street lamp overhead cast a dim glow, but the letters and numerals were distinct. It was an invoice from Apex Voyages. Dated yesterday. Paya Tavoria St. James. Memo, reservation, grand owner suite on the riverboat, the Gilded Magnolia. Total $15,000. The world around me stilled. The sounds of the night, the rustling leaves, a dog barking in the distance, all vanished. Only the numerals on the paper remained prominent. 15,000, exactly the sum I had provided them 3 days prior. My funds. They were not rectifying the roof. There was no mold. They had simply appropriated my money for a luxurious holiday and then declared to my face that I was an encumbrance, a burden to be left to guard the house while they sipped champagne funded by my life savings. My chest did not constrict. My heart did not falter. On the contrary, it began to beat with a steady, powerful rhythmic pulse, akin to the engine of a colossal ship gaining momentum. The tears that might have welled up for an ordinary grandmother evaporated, consumed by the icy flame of realization. Kenyatta believed she had triumphed over a frail elderly woman. Torius presumed mother would endure and pardon all transgressions. They forgot who I was before I donned an apron and began baking cornbread. They forgot that the name St. James was once uttered with respect in the logistics and trucking industry. I neatly folded the invoice and slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan. Then I returned to the carriage house, secured the lock, and proceeded to the bedroom. From the lowest drawer of my dresser, nestled beneath a pile of aged linen tablecloths, I extracted a vintage leather diary. It carried the scent of aged leather and premium paper. I opened it to the initial page. Only a single number was inscribed there, a number I had not dialed in 12 years, a direct line, a private channel. I lifted the telephone. It rang for an extended period, but I knew someone would answer. Even in the dead of night, for me, he would answer. Speaking, a gruff, surprised male voice responded. "Who is this on this line?" "Hello, Cyprian," I stated. My voice was unyielding as steel. "This is Oilia. I need to exercise my executive override, and I require a stateroom on the Gilded Magnolia immediately." "Oilia." A palpable silence descended upon the line, heavy and tangible. "Yes, it is I. Do not inquire as to why I am calling. Simply listen. I require the current ownership structure of the Riverflow Holdings Group without delay." A minute later, I learned something that elicited a genuine smile for the first time in 2 days within the darkness of my bedroom. The cruise company that owned the Gilded Magnolia was not merely a partner. It was a subsidiary we had acquired 15 years prior, during my tenure at the helm, and according to the documents Cyprian retrieved from the archives, my silent partner's shares extended to it as well. Legally, I was not merely requesting a favor. I was preparing to step onto the deck of my own vessel. The subsequent 48 hours passed in a mode I had nearly forgotten, yet which my body recalled instantly. Cold, dispassionate efficiency, while Tavorius and Kenyatta scurried about the estate, bickering over which luggage to bring. I waged a war via telephone, sequestered in the bathroom with the water running as a sonic diversion. My legal counsel, an old comrade named Solomon, whose voice possessed the creakiness of an unlubricated wagon wheel, initially attempted to dissuade me from drastic measures, but upon my explanation of the circumstances, he merely chuckled. "Oilia, you always possessed an acumen for playing the long game. Have it as you wish. I shall prepare the requisite documents to effect the transfer of operational authority for the duration of the voyage. Captain Thaddeus will be duly apprised." "Thaddeus? Emmerich Thaddeus?" I recalled him as a junior first mate, honourable and forthright. That worked in my favour. Between telephone calls, I packed. I unlocked the cedar closet at the rear, the key to which hung around my neck with my crucifix. There, within garment bags of robust canvas, resided my past existence. Attire that Kenyatta would have either pilfered or pawned long ago. I selected a cream-coloured linen pantsuit, Italian fabric, impeccably tailored to complement it, a silk scarf with an abstract design in terracotta and gold hues, no dressing gowns, no worn-out slippers. If I was going to war, I would do so in my finest attire. On the morning of their departure, pandemonium reigned in the main residence. Kenyatta was vociferously scolding Tavorius regarding a misplaced cosmetic case. Tavorius was darting about with wide, startled eyes, attempting to cram yet another duffel bag into the trunk of the SUV. I emerged onto the porch clad in my customary grey raincoat, concealing my newly chosen ensemble beneath it. In my hands I carried an old, worn travel bag, a deliberate misdirection. "Tavorius!" I called out. He flinched, nearly dropping a toiletry kit. "Mama, what now? We are running behind schedule," he barked, wiping perspiration from his brow. "I wish to inform you that I will not be remaining at home," I stated calmly. "I am proceeding to Sister Altha's residence. Her sciatica is acting up. She requested my assistance. I shall return in a week, precisely when you do." Kenyatta leaned out of the car window, already adorned with dark sunglasses. "Altha, splendid," she remarked, making no effort to conceal her elation. "Less electricity expended. Leave the keys with the neighbour. Very well, we are departing. Tavorius, enter the vehicle already." They did not even offer me an embrace. Tavorius waved a hand dismissively, took his place behind the wheel, and the automobile sped away towards the gate, tires squealing. I observed their departure until the red taillights vanished around the bend. Bon voyage, I whispered into the emptiness. Precisely 30 minutes later, a black stretch limousine glided to a halt before my gate, the gravel crunching softly under its tires. A chauffeur in a cap emerged, opened the door for me, and bowed his head respectfully. Mrs. St. James, we are prepared. Captain Thaddeus awaits your arrival. I settled onto the plush leather of the rear seat. The grey raincoat cascaded to the floor. I donned dark sunglasses, adjusted the silk scarf at my neck, and peered into the rearview mirror. Gazing back was not a pensioner who could be deceived and abandoned. Gazing back was the commander. The drive to the New Orleans port took 1 hour. We proceeded swiftly and with unwavering confidence, navigating traffic with ease thanks to the special permit affixed to the windshield. Upon arriving at the river terminal, I observed precisely what I had anticipated. The embarkation queue was immense. People were jostling, children were wailing, and someone was engaged in a dispute with security. The air was thick with heat, humidity, and the odor of exhaust fumes. My driver did not join the general throng. The vehicle smoothly bypassed the crowd and proceeded towards a sealed gate bearing the inscription, Service Entrance, Authorized Personnel Only. The guard, recognizing the license plate, instantly activated a button and the barrier ascended. We drove directly onto the wharf, where asphalt transitioned to concrete, immediately adjacent to the gangplank. I spotted them approximately 50 yards distant, separated by a chain-link fence that delineated the VIP section from the general populace. Torius, perspiring profusely, was dragging 2 sizable suitcases, attempting to push his way towards the check-in counter. Kenyatta stood nearby, gesticulating wildly and shouting at a porter who appeared to be disregarding her histrionics. They looked pathetic in their pretense of opulence, purchased with stolen funds. The driver opened the door. I stepped onto the concrete pier. The breeze from the Mississippi brushed against my face, humid and heavy, carrying the scent of freedom and river silt. 2 young crew members, clad in immaculate white uniforms, immediately approached me. Madam St. James, one of them stated, gathering my small valise as if it were a sacred relic. Welcome aboard. The captain has directed that your luggage be conveyed to the owner's suite without delay. Please follow us. I adjusted my spectacles and, without glancing back at the fence where my son and daughter-in-law were struggling for their moment in the sun, I stepped onto the gangway. They were too engrossed in their petty drama to notice how the shadow of my limousine fell upon their aspirations. I entered the owner's suite, and the door sealed silently behind me, effectively muffling the clamour of the port. Perfect tranquility permeated the space, disturbed only by the barely perceptible hum of the air conditioning. The area was vast, a living room with panoramic windows, a bedroom finished in mahogany, and a private access to a secluded section of the deck. However, my interest was not in the interiors I had approved from catalogues a decade ago. My focus was on the large wall-mounted monitor connected to the internal surveillance system. I pressed a button on the remote. The screen illuminated, bifurcating into several segments. The camera overlooking the deck. A corridor view revealed precisely what I had anticipated. Tavorius and Kenyatta were traversing the carpeted hallway, their expressions akin to those of children in a confectionery. Tavorius dragged the luggage, puffing with exertion but smiling, while Kenyatta glided ahead, her fingers trailing along the polished handrails. They paused before the entrance to stateroom 404, the diamond suite, the very one I had financed, believing I was preserving the roof of our ancestral home. They entered. I shifted the camera to an interior perspective. Indeed, the suites were equipped with discrete cameras positioned in the ceiling corners for the safety and resolution of guest disputes. The audio was exceptionally clear. "Lord have mercy, Torius!" Kenyatta shrieked, tossing her handbag onto the substantial bed, draped in pristine white linens. "Observe this balcony. Behold this bathroom." She twirled around the room, her future gown a vibrant blur against the cream-colored walls. Torius, wiping his brow, slumped into an armchair. A look of satisfied contentment spread across his face. "Well, was it worth it?" he inquired, gazing at his wife with adoration. "You better believe it is." Kenyatta moved swiftly towards the table where a welcome bottle of champagne rested in an ice bucket. "Open it promptly. We must inaugurate the commencement of our liberation." The pop of the cork sounded hollow like a gunshot through the speakers in my cabin. Tavorius poured the effervescent wine into tall flutes. Foam overflowed the rim, dripping onto the carpet, but they paid it no mind. "To us!" Kenyatta proclaimed, raising her glass, "and to finally escaping that tomb." They clinked their glasses. Tavorius took a generous draught and chuckled. "Listen, I felt a touch of unease when we were departing. Mama was just standing there with that decrepit grocery bag." Kenyatta snorted, her countenance contorting into a contemptuous grimace. She set her glass down and hunched over, shuffling her feet, mimicking a shaky gait. Her voice altered, becoming raspy and pitiable, a caricature of my voice, though I never spoke in such a manner. "Oh, children, you proceed onward. I shall remain here with the felines. Guard the estate, conserve a penny," she mumbled, and then both erupted into laughter. "Oh, I cannot. She is so credulous, Torius. No funds. She ingested it without even a choke. The old dowager believes anything we utter, provided we do not trouble her. She is likely seated there presently, sipping her tepid tea and contemplating. Poor us," Torius added, refilling his glass. "Well, it is perfectly adequate. Let her stand guard. The fresh air is beneficial for her, and we are royalty." I stared at the screen, unblinking. In my hand I held a mug of hot coffee, and it did not tremble. I felt no anguish, merely revulsion, akin to observing vermin that had infiltrated the sugar receptacle. They felt invincible. They believed the world belonged to them. "All right, enough of somber matters," Kenyatta declared, downing her champagne in a single gulp. "Let us depart. I wish to explore the dining establishment. They say the chef is of French origin, and we must immediately establish our authority over the staff. Otherwise, they tend to be lax with visiting patrons." They exited the cabin, closing the door with a definitive slam. I observed through the hallway camera how Kenyatta snapped her fingers directly in front of a passing maid, demanding that she move her cart from their path. I picked up the internal telephone and dialed a short numerical sequence. "Captain," I said. "Yes, Madam St. James." Emir Emmerich's voice was crisp and efficient, with a military cadence. "The occupants of stateroom 404 have vacated the cabin. Commence phase 2. Pack their effects neatly but without undue deference, and deactivate their access cards." "It shall be accomplished. The keys for the new assignment are prepared." I reclined in my chair. The performance was about to commence. An hour elapsed. The sun began its descent towards the horizon, painting the waters of the Mississippi in hues of gold. The gilded magnolia sounded its horn and smoothly disengaged from the wharf. Tavorius and Kenyatta, according to the camera feeds, were subjecting a bartender on the middle deck to torment, insisting that he remake cocktails that, in their estimation, contained an excessive amount of ice. When they returned, flushed and pleased with themselves, to the entrance of their suite to prepare for dinner, I reactivated the audio feed. Torius casually swiped his access card against the lock. The indicator light blinked red. He frowned, wiped the card on the sleeve of his blazer, and swiped it again. Read. "What are you fussing about?" Kenyatta inquired with impatience. "I need to use the facilities." "Yes, it has been demagnetized or something similar," Torius grumbled, his anxiety mounting. He tugged forcefully on the handle. The door remained firmly secured. At that precise moment, a senior steward, a young man with impeccable posture and a stoic expression, appeared from around the corner as if by happenstance. "Trouble, folks?" Kenyatta snapped. "Your infernal card is not functioning. Open the door for us immediately. Our belongings are inside." The steward offered a polite smile, but his eyes remained unyielding. He produced a tablet, consulted the data, and shook his head. "My apologies, Mrs. St. James. There was an administrative oversight during the booking process. You see, this particular suite is reserved under a priority shareholder designation. An asset reassignment has occurred." "What?" Torius's eyes widened. "What assets? We paid 15,000. This is our cabin." "Regrettably, the system has invalidated your reservation in this category," the steward continued unflappably. "Your personal effects have already been relocated to a stateroom commensurate with your present standing of confirmed loyalty." He handed Tavorius 2 ordinary mechanical keys, each bearing a substantial brass tag. Stamped upon them was the numeral 0012. "Where is that?" Kenyatta demanded suspiciously, refusing to take the key. "Lower deck, madam, stern section, adjacent to the engineering quarters." "Are you jesting?" she shrieked, her voice so loud that the echo reverberated down the corridor. "In the engine room? You intend to confine us to the engine room? I shall lodge a formal complaint. Where is the manager? Where is the captain?" "The administrative office is situated on the sun deck in the VIP enclave," the steward replied calmly, gesturing towards the staircase. "However, I must inform you that the decision is final." Kenyatta snatched the keys from the steward's grasp and hurled them at Tavorius. "Let us proceed," she hissed, seizing her husband by the elbow. "We're going to dismantle this shoddy operation piece by piece. I'll drag them to court. They'll be begging for mercy." They thrashed about like startled oxen, then bolted towards the upper deck's access, where I, reclined in a plush seat, was observing the twilight fade and relishing the quiet. Adjusting my spectacles, I opened a book of French verses and savoured a sip of my espresso. The cadence of footsteps on the stairs intensified. Their fury was approaching, destined to shatter against the bedrock of my existence. The door to the exclusive sun deck burst inward with the concussive force of a siege weapon. The jarring clang of metal against its magnetic catch sent the gulls, which had been lazily circling the stern, scattering in alarm. I remained unmoved, meticulously turning a page, appreciating the delicate rustle of the paper, and brought my porcelain cup to my lips. "Where is that confounded manager?" Kenyatta's high-pitched cry fractured the tranquil air of the river, obliterating the serene interplay of wind and water. "I insist on speaking with someone immediately." "We paid good money," Torius gasped, breathless from his exertion. "You have no right to confine us to this meagre space." They stormed onto the deck, prepared to unleash destruction. Their eyes darted wildly, searching for a target, anyone in uniform to vent their venom upon. But the deck was deserted. Only I sat at the central table, shielded by a canvas canopy, with a server frozen at a respectful distance. Holding a silver coffee urn, they halted abruptly. Initially, they perceived only a silhouette. A woman clad in an immaculate white linen suit, sporting a wide-brimmed hat, and large dark glasses obscuring half her face. A woman exuding an aura of calm and that distinct, unhurried confidence inherent to inherited wealth. Kenyatta took a step forward, her mouth opening to resume her tirade, but the words caught in her throat. She squinted. I deliberately removed my glasses and met their gaze. The silence that enveloped the deck was more potent than any outburst. Mother, Torius stammered, his face contorted, his jaw slack, rendering him akin to a bewildered fish stranded on land. Kenyatta faltered, then flushed crimson, angry splotches appearing on her neck. You! She shrieked. In that sound lay a potent cocktail of disbelief and fury. What are you doing here? I carefully placed my glasses on the table beside my book and consulted my watch. Drinking coffee, Kenyatta, and enjoying the scenery until you arrived and disrupted it with your shouting. Torius advanced, his fists clenching, his apprehension transmuted into hostility. The instinctive defense of a feeble individual cornered by their own illusions. Are you spying on us? He bellowed, spittle flying. Have you completely lost your faculties, old woman? Get out of here, you deranged voyeur. How did you even arrive here? On whose funds? It was our money. The realization dawned on Kenyatta. She lunged towards the table, her eyes burning with fanatical intensity. You've pilfered our funds. You neglected to settle the repair costs. You purchased passage to shatter our vacation. That was my money, Kenyatta, I responded placidly, my voice unwavering. The funds I meticulously saved over years, which you two absconded with under the pretext of structural deficiencies. You sorceress! Kenyatta, having lost the last vestiges of her composure, lunged across the table, attempting to seize the lapel of my jacket and drag me from my chair. Get out of here! Security! Remove this harpy! Her taloned fingers, tipped with long, sharp nails, were inches from my suit's fabric, when a voice resonant as a ship's horn pierced the air. Remove your hands! It was not a shout, but a directive, issued with an authority that brooked no hesitation. Kenyatta recoiled as if struck by an electric shock. Tavorius instinctively ducked, drawing his head into his shoulders. From the bridge entrance, Captain Ema Thaddeus emerged, resplendent in his dress uniform adorned with gold braiding and a peaked cap. He possessed the imposing stature of a cliff face. Flanking him were two burly security officers. Thaddeus strode past the stunned Tavorius without so much as a glance, and positioned himself between me and Kenyatta. His shadow completely enveloped my daughter-in-law. Withdraw your hands from the proprietor of this vessel, he commanded, his voice a low rumble, fixing Kenyatta with undisguised disdain. Tavorius blinked, struggling to comprehend the captain's words. Proprietor? He echoed, his voice faltering. He gave a nervous, disbelieving chuckle, pointing a finger at me. Captain, you must be mistaken. This is my mother. She's a pensioner. She resides in a guest cottage. Her only indulgence is sweet tea. Thaddeus slowly turned his head towards Tavorius. His gaze was glacial. Mr. St. James, he enunciated, his tone frigid. Permit me to clarify. Madame Oilia St. James holds the controlling stake in Riverflow Holdings. She is the owner of this shipping enterprise, that wharfage yonder, and this riverboat, from its keel to its uppermost mast. Torius swayed precariously. He glanced at me, then at the captain, then back at me. In his eyes a world was disintegrating, a world where he was the shrewd and cunning player, and I the frail and foolish elder. That's impossible, Kenyatta whispered, clutching the back of an unoccupied chair for support. She has nothing. She relinquished everything to us. Technically, Thaddeus continued, delivering the final blow with ruthless precision, you are not presently at a resort. You are within Madame Oilia's personal quarters, and judging by your conduct, you are unwelcome intruders who have also committed acts of aggression and trespass within a private domain. I observed as the weight of his pronouncement settled upon them. It wasn't merely the revelation of wealth, but the stark realization that they had pilfered $15,000 from an individual who commanded millions. They had snatched a pittance from a dragon they mistook for a lizard. "Mother!" Trice wheezed. His legs gave way. He didn't sit, he collapsed. His knees struck the teak decking with a dull thud. Kenyatta slumped beside him. Her mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish, but no sound emerged. Their arrogance, their perceived superiority, dissolved entirely, leaving only primal terror in the presence of the woman who calmly continued to stir her coffee with a diminutive spoon. "Emma," I said softly, my gaze not deviating towards the cowering pair. "The coffee is growing cold. Please take a seat. We need to discuss our itinerary, escort them from my sight." I dismissed them quietly, returning my attention to my cup. Security personnel lifted them by their arms, like sacks of sand. Torius continued to mutter incoherently, his feet dragging sluggishly across the deck, while Kenyatta, conversely, had become a statue of shock and bewilderment. They were not ejected from the vessel, not yet. Image understood my intentions without a word. A unique form of torment awaited them, the agonizing uncertainty within confined quarters. They were escorted to cabin 012. I was intimately familiar with that cabin. It was situated directly above the propeller shaft. It lacked portholes, and the engine's vibration was so intense that a glass of water on the nightstand would perpetually traverse the surface. The ideal locale for contemplation. The entire day passed in absolute silence. I allowed them to stew in their own anxieties, their fear and conjecture. I envisioned Kenyatta pacing agitatedly within that cramped box, hissing accusations at Tavorius, desperately concocting justifications. It was solitary. We merely borrowed it. We would have repaid it. She's a mother. She will undoubtedly forgive, she likely repeated incessantly. They harbored the delusion that my maternal heart, which they had repeatedly trampled upon for years, would once again exhibit vulnerability. By 8 o'clock that evening, I dispatched a steward to them. He delivered an envelope, crafted from heavy cream-colored stock, embellished with gold embossing, conveying an invitation to dine. Private dining chamber, the Romanoff, 8:30 in the evening. I arrived ahead of schedule. The chamber was diminutive and intimate, designed for high-stakes business deliberations. Its walls were panelled in oak, illuminated by subdued sconce lighting, and adorned with heavy velvet draperies in a deep emerald hue. I occupied the head of the table. Before me lay a portion of baked trout and a glass of dry Riesling. Precisely at 8:30, the doors swung open. They entered with evident hesitation. Kenyatta had managed to change into a black cocktail dress. Evidently, she believed a mournful appearance would elicit sympathy. Tavorius wore the same blazer, now noticeably creased and pathetic. They resembled errant schoolchildren summoned to the headmaster's office, yet a flicker of hope still persisted in their eyes, the hope that I had merely been posturing as an authority figure and that reconciliation was imminent. "Mother," Tavorius began, taking a tentative step towards the table, "we're so pleased that we can converse calmly." "Sit," I instructed, gesturing to the 2 chairs positioned opposite me. They complied. Kenyatta immediately plastered a smile across her face, though the corners of her lips quivered. "Mother Oilia," she cooed nervously, fidgeting with a napkin. "What a dreadful misunderstanding today. We were so astonished. You comprehend?" Nerves, this renovation project. We simply desired what was best. We merely wished to spare you our troubles. I continued to dissect my fish in silence. The delicate clinking of silverware against porcelain was the sole sound in the room. They anticipated menus, awaited servers, and looked for wine, but the table before them remained barren. No cutlery, no glassware, only polished wood and a thick grey cardboard folder resting in the centre. Where is... Torius scanned the surroundings in confusion. You will not be served dinner. I set down my fork, dabbed my lips with a napkin, and addressed my son. My gaze held no warmth, only a profound weariness. Have you eaten, Tavorius? You've been dining at my expense for the past 5 years. I suspect you're quite satiated. What are you implying? He attempted to feign ignorance, but his eyes flickered towards the folder. I extended my hand and deliberately, with a quiet scrape, slid the folder across the table towards them. Open it. Torius flipped the cover with trembling fingers. Kenyatta craned her neck, peering at the documents within. The initial page was a spreadsheet, columns of figures, dates, and annotations in red marker. This is not a cruise invoice, I stated, taking a sip of wine. This is a forensic accounting investigation, a comprehensive audit of my personal finances and the accounts to which I granted you power of attorney. Torius paled to the point of blending with the tablecloth. Kenyatta swallowed convulsively. Did you truly believe I wouldn't notice? My voice was soft, yet each word landed with the weight of a stone. Receipt for hypertension medication, $400, yet withdrawn from the card, $1,500. Mother, prices have escalated. The pharmacy is costly. Yet, in reality, the disparity was diverted to Kenyatta's manicures. I turned a mental page, the document etched into my memory. Groceries. You presented me with a bag of grits and milk, yet claimed $1,000 weekly for assisting mother. You even procured fuel for your SUV using my pension card. Mother, it's a mistake, my son wheezed, not daring to meet my gaze. And now the roof repairs, $15,000. I continued relentlessly. The zenith of your avarice. You didn't merely abscond with that sum. You stole it while gazing into my eyes and weaving tales of decaying timbers. You pilfered it, knowing it represented my final savings for unforeseen circumstances. Oilia, listen, Kenyatta shrieked, sensing the ground disappearing from beneath her. We intended to repay it. Tavorius is experiencing difficulties at work. We just needed a little... I slammed my palm flat on the table. The sound was sharp and decisive. They flinched. I am not senile. Tavorius, I said, my voice exceedingly gentle, and that softness unnerved them more than any shouting. I was patient. I harbored the hope that your conscience would awaken, that you would recall who purchased the home you inhabit, who financed your education. I waited for you to attain contentment, but you are insatiable. I closed my eyes briefly, bidding farewell to the illusion of familial harmony I had striven to maintain. My patience expired yesterday when I discovered that invoice discarded in the waste bin. I gestured towards the folder. Examine the final page, a bank notification. An hour ago, I rescinded all powers of attorney. Your cards linked to my accounts are now frozen. Joint accounts are under sequestration pending an inquiry into embezzlement. Embezzlement? Tavorius looked up at me, his eyes wide with horror. Mother, you're pressing charges. Your personal cards are currently overdrawn, I continued, disregarding his question. Credit limits nullified by my directive as owner of the partner bank. You possess not a single cent, not even enough for a bottle of water. Kenyatta sprang to her feet, overturning her chair. You cannot do this. We are your family. We are here in the middle of the river. How will we survive? How would you live without me? I responded calmly. Humbly and quietly, I pressed the button to summon the staff. Dinner has concluded. You are dismissed. Proceed to your cabin. You require rest. Tomorrow will be a challenging day for you. The doors opened, revealing the imposing figure of the head of security. Tavorius and Kenyatta, shoulders hunched, shuffled towards the exit. clutching the folder containing the evidence of their shame. They disappeared into the shadowy depths of the lower decks, leaving me in the ambient light of the lamps, solitary with my congealing fish and the acrid taste of victory which resembled ash. The following morning greeted me with a dense, milky fog rolling across the water. I sat in the solarium, a glass-enclosed veranda on the upper deck, where palm trees and orchids flourished, creating the illusion of a tropical haven amidst the American autumn. In my hands I held a cup of herbal infusion, and a tartan blanket rested upon my knees. The ambience here was tranquil, yet the silence was deceptive. I was aware that several decks, below in the cramped confines of cabin 012, where the propeller's vibration rattled one's very bones, a tempest raged. Security had reported that the shouting commenced during the night. Cornered rats invariably resort to mutual aggression. Stripped of their wealth, their status, and most critically, their illusion of invincibility, Tavorius and Kenyatta predictably began seeking a scapegoat. And predictably, each identified the other as the perpetrator. The solarium door creaked softly. I did not turn, continuing to observe the prow of the riverboat cleaving through the grey expanse of water. "Mother Oilia!" The voice was hushed, trembling, saturated with tears. I gently placed my cup upon its saucer. The delicate clink of porcelain sounded unnaturally resonant. Turning my head, I saw Kenyatta. She appeared transformed. Her previously haughty posture had vanished. The predatory gleam in her eyes was extinguished. She wore a simple black dress. Her hair was carelessly pulled back into a bun, and her face, devoid of makeup, only accentuated her reddened, swollen eyes. She stood at the entrance, wringing her hands nervously, much like a schoolgirl about to confess to breaking a window. "May I?" she whispered. I gestured to the wicker chair opposite. "Sit, Kenyatta." She approached and sat on the very edge, hunching over, endeavouring to appear smaller. "I couldn't sleep," she began, a solitary tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Tavorius, he completely lost control. He was shouting, blaming me for everything." She sobbed, concealing her face with her palms. I observed this performance with detached curiosity, akin to a theatre patron intimately familiar with the unfolding narrative. "Oilia, you must listen to me." Kenyatta removed her hands from her face and looked at me pleadingly. "I had no idea. I swear to you I had no inkling of the magnitude. Tavorius always maintained it was his earnings, that it represented bonuses, successful ventures. I trusted him. He's the man, the provider. How was I to know he was pilfering from his own mother?" She leaned forward, attempting to capture my gaze. "I am also a victim. Do you comprehend? He exploited me. He compelled me to live extravagantly to maintain his facade. Purchase this, wear that. We had to maintain appearances. I merely aspired to be a good wife, and now you perceive me as a monster." Her voice faltered into a whisper. "I love you, Mother. I always yearned for us to be a true family. But Taurius, he turned me against you. He uttered malicious falsehoods. He erected barriers between us. He fabricated the story about the roof. I implored him, 'We cannot take Mother's last dime.' And he scoffed, remarking, 'You wouldn't understand anyway.' I silently reached for the teapot and poured her a cup. Steam unfurled, carrying the scent of herbs and deception. "Drink," I instructed evenly. "Your throat must be parched from so many pronouncements." Kenyatta grasped the cup with both hands as a drowning person clutches a life raft. "Thank you. You are a saint, Oilia. I do not deserve your benevolence. I simply wish for you to know that I am leaving him. The moment we disembark, I shall initiate divorce proceedings. I cannot endure life with a thief and a liar. I will work. I shall reimburse every last penny. Just please, do not banish me from your life. Grant me an opportunity to atone." She met my gaze with eyes that appeared clear and devoted. Had I not known her for a decade, I might have been convinced. Her performance was flawless, the quintessential victim of a tyrannical spouse. Perceiving the glint of illumination and repentance, I took a sip of my tea, feeling its warmth permeate my being. "You are remarkably persuasive, Kenyatta," I remarked thoughtfully, almost theatrically so. "Tavorius is indeed weak. He is a follower, moldable clay in someone else's hands." Kenyatta's countenance brightened. She believed she had successfully reeled me in. "Yes, precisely. He is feeble and I merely succumbed to his influence. But there exists one particular detail." I placed my cup down and picked up the tablet resting beside a bowl of cookies. "This vessel is equipped with highly advanced security systems, particularly within the lower decks, encompassing the engine rooms and crew quarters where you are presently housed." Kenyatta froze. The smile of burgeoning hope began to recede from her face, revealing burgeoning fear. "Due to engine noise and insurance mandates," I continued, my voice adopting a didactic tone as I swiped my finger across the screen, "audio recording operates 24/7 in those cabins in the event of emergencies or passenger disputes." I tapped a file icon. The stillness of the winter garden was shattered by a sharp, hysterical voice. Kenyatta's voice, but not the one currently seated before me. Her authentic voice, the recording captured late last night, blared from the tablet speakers. "You imbecile, Tavorius! You spineless jellyfish! You couldn't even lie convincingly." Then my son's voice emerged, pathetic and defensive. "Kenyatta, keep your voice down. They might overhear us." "I don't give a damn!" Kenyatta shrieked on the recording. "Let them hear. As soon as we reach dry land, I'm finding lawyers. We'll declare her legally incompetent. She clearly suffers from senile dementia. If she imagines herself some business magnate, we'll relegate that old cow to a state facility, the cheapest one available, where they'll break her quickly and we'll sell the house. I refuse to forfeit my inheritance because you're terrified of mother." I activated the pause function. The final utterance, "old cow," hung suspended in the air, reverberating off the glass walls of the conservatory. Kenyatta turned deathly pale. The blood drained from her face with such rapidity that she appeared on the verge of collapse. Her mouth opened, but no sound escaped. All her declarations of love, sacrifice, and monstrous Tavorius crumbled to dust in an instant. I regarded her without anger, only with an infinite weariness. "A nursing home?" I inquired softly. "State-run, the most economical option?" Kenyatta began to shake her head, recoiling, dragging her chair with her. The chair legs screeched against the floor. That was just emotional. I didn't mean it. You never desired a mother-in-law, Kenyatta," I interrupted, closing the tablet cover. "You never desired a family. You sought a benefactor. You perceived me solely as a walking wallet that, for some inexplicable reason, was persisting for too long." I rose to my feet. Kenyatta pressed herself back into the chair as if bracing for an assault. "Sponsorship terminated," I declared. "Return to your husband. Enjoy each other's company. You haven't much time remaining until our arrival." I turned and walked towards the window, signaling the end of the audience. Behind me, I heard labored breathing, a choked sob, and then the hasty, shuffling footsteps of someone in flight. Beyond the glass, a golden forest drifted by, but I saw only the reflection of my own countenance, stern, serene, and finally liberated. No more than an hour after our discourse in the solarium, the quietude of my private library was disrupted by sounds of a struggle and heavy panting. I was seated in a deep leather armchair, reviewing cargo manifests for the preceding quarter, when the doors burst open, nearly detaching from their hinges. A peculiar procession appeared in the doorway. Leading the way, quite literally dragging a man in a white coat by his sleeve, was Kenyatta. Her face, moments before streaked with tears and pitiably contrite, was now contorted into a grimace of deranged resolve. Behind her, stumbling and glancing around wildly, cowered Tavorius. "Here, doctor! Please attend to him!" "Quicker!" Henrietta shrieked, hauling the physician with such force that his jacket almost tore. "She's present. She poses a risk to herself and others." The vessel's medical officer, a man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard and weary eyes, attempted to disengage his arm, but his daughter-in-law's grasp was unyielding. "Madam, please compose yourself," he implored, seeking to appeal to her logic. "You cannot barge into the exclusive section unannounced." "You fail to comprehend," Henrietta interrupted, her breath ragged. She advanced towards me but halted several feet away as though apprehensive of a bite. "She's suffering from acute psychosis. She's delirious. She asserts ownership of this entire vessel." Henrietta jabbed a finger in my direction, her chipped nail polish trembling. "Observe her, seated like royalty, poring over documents. She has dementia, doctor. Advanced paranoia coupled with delusions of grandeur. She absconded with our funds, confined us in the hold, fabricated fictitious Riverflow holdings, administer a sedative, haloperidol, anything to silence her preposterous pronouncements." I deliberately removed my reading spectacles and placed them atop the report. Their scheme was as transparent and flimsy as glass. If persuasion and intimidation proved fruitless, only one avenue remained: to declare me mentally unsound. If a physician documented acute psychosis and delirium, they, as next of kin, would gain temporary legal custodianship. This would grant them access to my accounts, authority to sign documents, and dominion over the infirm elder. It was their final gambit. "Doctor, I insist you formally record her state," Henrietta persisted, her voice rising, accompanied by flecks of spittle. "We require a medical attestation to secure guardianship. We must safeguard her assets before she squanders them in a fit of insanity. She's completely disoriented." The physician finally wrenched his sleeve from Henrietta's vice-like grip. He adjusted his garment, repositioned the stethoscope around his neck, and advanced. Tortius regarded him with a flicker of expectation. "Please, doctor, question her. Inquire about the vessel's rightful owner. You'll witness the truth." The physician exhaled deeply, removed his slender-framed spectacles, and polished them with a handkerchief retrieved from his pocket. He then met my gaze. A glint of amusement danced in his eyes, an emotion he struggled to conceal behind his professional demeanour. "Good afternoon, Madam St. James," he stated in a gentle, even tone. "How is your blood pressure this afternoon?" The morning medication had been effective. A profound silence descended upon the room. Henrietta stood, mouth agape. Tortius blinked as if struck by an unseen force. "Good afternoon, Dr. Beauchamp," I responded, a subtle smile gracing my lips. "Thank you. My pressure is perfectly normal. 120/80. The river air is remarkably restorative. It's a pity some passengers generate excessive disturbances." Dr. Beauchamp appeared momentarily flustered. You know each other?" He turned to face them, his previous gentleness vanishing entirely. His gaze now regarded them with disdain. "Young individuals," he announced in an icily precise tone. "I have been Ophelia's personal physician for 22 years. I oversaw her recuperation following her husband's paralytic episode. I monitor her cardiac health. I am intimately familiar with every detail of her physical and mental faculties." He took a step towards Tortius, who instinctively retreated, bumping into a bookshelf. "You allege your mother suffers from dementia?" Dr. Beauchamp continued, his voice still resonating with controlled authority. Curious. Her most recent magnetic resonance imaging indicated her cerebral vasculature is in superior condition compared to either of yours, judging by the preposterous charade you've orchestrated. Her intellect is sharper than any captain navigating this waterway. However, your collective hysteria suggests a need for psychiatric assessment for yourselves. Henrietta clutched her head, sliding down the doorframe. But we were unaware, she stammered. How? You were unaware, I interjected, remaining seated. Because you never bothered to inquire. For 2 decades, Dr. Beauchamp visited our residence monthly. Did you ever once ask about the vehicle parked at the entrance? Did you ever inquire about my medications? No, your sole focus was yourselves. Dr. Beauchamp produced a notepad from his breast pocket, scribbled a brief note, tore out the page, and presented it to Torvius. What is this? The son inquired dully, examining the paper. That is an invoice, the doctor explained with polite formality, for a spurious emergency summons of a senior specialist outside of operational hours, necessitating an unscheduled consultation regarding a mental health evaluation. The patient's mental state is deemed entirely sound. My time, however, is a valuable commodity. Torvius's gaze fell upon the figure, his complexion paled. $500, he exhaled. We have no funds. Our credit has been suspended. That is not my concern, Doctor, Beauchamp stated, turning his back to them. The outstanding balance will be appended to your cabin charges. Should payment not be rendered prior to our docking, you will be required to address the matter with the authorities ashore. Good day. He offered a conspiratorial wink in my direction and departed the library, closing the door softly behind him. I was left in their company, 2 defeated figures amidst the opulence they so desperately desired, yet which had ultimately spurned them. Depart, I instructed, donning my spectacles once more and returning to the report before securing the door from my side. Tortious pulled Henrietta by the arm. She moved like an automaton. Her gaze fixed straight ahead, they exited. The click of the latch echoed like the final nail sealing their demise. They had forfeited everything, including that which they had never truly possessed. I glanced out the window. The shoreline was drawing near. Ancient cypress trees stood sentinel beside a weathered landing. The conclusion of their journey and the commencement of mine. The riverboat vibrated throughout its structure and came to a halt, its hull making a dull, thin contact against the rubber fenders of the dock. The drone of the engine subsided, replaced by the whisper of wind through the willows and the raucous cawing of crows circling overhead the deserted levee. We had reached Cottonwood Point, a desolate yet hauntingly beautiful landing in rural Arkansas, hundreds of miles from the nearest major metropolis, accessible only via deteriorated roadways. I stood at the primary egress on the lower deck, clad in a camel hair coat and the familiar silk scarf. Beside me, arms crossed over his chest, stood the head of security. Taravius and Henrietta appeared in the corridor a minute later, their demeanor abject. Dark circles shadowed their eyes and they appeared agitated. Upon seeing me, Taravius's face momentarily brightened. A flicker of hope ignited in his eyes, the naive, misguided hope of a child expecting a treat after a brief disciplinary period. Mother, he said, a hesitant smile forming, we've arrived. Is this an excursion? Have you decided to show us the old cotton fields? They say the history here is quite profound. Henrietta remained silent, her gaze weary as it swept over the open gangway. This is your destination, I stated coolly, returning no smile. Disembark. Oh, splendid! Taravius nodded, attempting to feign enthusiasm. Let's take a stroll. Get some fresh air. It will do Henrietta good. She's quite overcome. We'll just retrieve our jackets. You are not required to return to your quarters. The head of security's voice boomed like a hammer blow. Mr. St. James, Mrs. St. James, please exit. They froze. The crisp autumn air, now flowing in from the exterior, washed over their faces, yet they seemed oblivious. What do you mean, exit? Henrietta whispered. I gestured with my chin towards the open gangway. Proceed, you are expected. Nudged by the stern gaze of security, they stepped onto the metal grating of the gangway. They descended slowly, hesitantly, glancing back as if anticipating a jest, but as their feet made contact with the damp, cracked concrete of the landing, they beheld it. Directly before them, huddled close for comfort, stood their luggage, 4 substantial plastic cases they had so ostentatiously brought aboard in New Orleans. Adjacent to them lay a folder containing the unpaid doctor's bill and the eviction notice. Toravius remained frozen, his gaze shifting from the suitcases to the desolate levee, devoid of taxis or buses, save for a solitary dog sniffing a bollard. He then looked upwards towards me, leaning against the railing. "Mother!" he cried, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail. "What does this signify? Are you abandoning us here?" Henrietta clutched a suitcase handle as if it were a lifeline. "You have no right!" she shrieked, stamping her foot. "This is the middle of nowhere. We have no money. Our accounts are frozen. How will we return home? It's 500 miles. I gazed down at them. From this vantage point they appeared diminished, not imposing adversaries poisoning my existence, but rather insignificant, scurrying insects. The wind tugged at my hair, yet I felt no chill. For the first time in years, a warmth suffused me. "You informed me prior to your departure. No funds. Stay home." My voice, amplified by the river's acoustics, carried across the landing, drowning out the crows. "You stated you could not afford a ticket for your mother." I paused, allowing each word to penetrate their consciousness. "Well, now you are without funds, and you cannot afford to continue this journey, Mommy." Toravia scrambled towards the gangway, but the deckhands had already begun its ascent. Metal scraped against concrete with a jarring clang. "Forgive us, we'll repay everything. Don't leave us here, we'll perish." "You are young, healthy," I replied calmly. "You possess limbs. Find employment or hitchhike. After all, you consistently proclaimed yourselves self-made, asserting you achieved everything independently. Here is your opportunity to demonstrate it without my financial assistance." The gangway locked into place with a resounding thud. The engines of the Gilded Magnolia roared to life, churning the dark water into a foamy wake. The riverboat commenced its slow drift away from the dock. "Stop, stop, you wicked old woman!" Henrietta shrieked, realizing pleas were futile. She hurled a shoe at the vessel, but it merely splashed into the water. "I curse you, you will die alone." I did not flinch. Their cries gradually diminished, swallowed by distance and the rhythmic rush of water. I observed them standing on the desolate, windswept pier. 2 minuscule figures beside a heap of worthless belongings in an alien locale, penniless. I turned away from the shore. The past remained there, on the concrete. Emmerich approached me. He removed his cap and regarded me with a questioning expression. "Course set for New Orleans, Madam St. James, returning to schedule." I looked ahead where the river broadened, vanishing into the boundless horizon. The sky was clearing and rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds. "No, Captain," I declared, a subtle twitch at the corners of my lips. "To perdition with the schedule." I inhaled deeply. The air was sweet. "Set course for the north, Emmerich, all the way to headquarters in Minnesota." He appeared surprised, yet a spark of adventure flashed in his eyes. "That's an additional 2 weeks of sailing. What compels us to return there?" "I have always harbored a desire to witness the autumn foliage on the upper Mississippi," I replied. "They say when the maples transform, it resembles a fiery ocean. I postponed it for 30 years. First work, then my husband, then my son, then grandchildren who never materialized. Enough deferrals. A potent, long suppressed emotion swelled within my chest. It was neither a chuckle nor a smirk. I threw my head back and laughed towards the heavens. It was the laughter of liberation, a loud, pure, resonant sound that soared over the Mississippi, startling the gulls. I laughed at my former blindness, at their avarice, at the sheer absurdity of existence. I laughed out of pure joy. I possessed wealth, I commanded a vessel, and an abundance of time stretched before me. My life was not concluding, it was merely commencing. Did you find the narrative engaging? From which city are you listening? Let's connect in the comments section. If you enjoyed the story, your super thanks would be greatly appreciated, enabling me to continue sharing similar narratives. Thank you sincerely for your invaluable support. I eagerly await your thoughts on the story. On your screen, you'll find 2 new life stories that come highly recommended. My channel offers a wealth of additional content. Please remember to subscribe. Until our next life story, with affection and respect.